rest, but just before starting, I want to share a little bit, because I know some of you, but not everyone knows me, and a little bit about the church. So I was baptized in London in 91, so 34 years ago, because it was actually end of June. And I came from a region near Venice, and I escaped to London searching for something, and I didn't know what I was searching. I was doing a lot of nightclubs life, enjoying life, and searching for something. And anyway, my life was transformed. I remember that my mom said, "Oh, what happened to my son?" I sent my sister to check in London if I became totally crazy, and so there was the fear she had back then. But then she saw me totally transformed, and so to cut 34 years in less than a minute, because they told me they would cut my voice, and I was really transformed, and the joy of living for Christ. I was in London for another 5 years, then I went back to Milano. I decided, I used to work in IT, still work IT now, but to start earlier in the morning, devote the rest to the church, as I good paid job, and I could do from the afternoon till late. Then I was asked to work for the church. Then there was some, and some of you know, some challenging time, but in these years I've always been part of some form of leadership. And I don't like the word leadership because it sounds kind of a powerful, like servanthood. We have to be servant of Christ. And the church is, I belong to the old one because it's a very young church in Milano. It's beautiful to see a lot of young people doing most of things, singing, preaching, taking care of the church. And so there is, we are like, put us, over 50, just go in the back. Sometimes they involve us in something. So it's a privilege to have an opportunity to speak, because in Milano I'm not allowed to anymore. No, but it's great to see a revived church full of young people, and it's beautiful. And as Misha said, I work for a little company, so I don't have many colleagues now, but I go swimming very often. I go 5, sometimes 6 times a week, and I have a group of friends. We organize swims, and I always send the videos of the singing, to the, I say, wow, it's amazing, all these young people, and so I like to share what is the real life as a Christian, to see, because young people, it really is a reflection of a healthy church somehow, when you will see just a church over 70, there is something there which is not right. Today we're going to talk about one topic, rest, which exactly does not represent my life. Rest, and I have to say, this morning I woke up after a night where in my sleep I was catching a train, trying not to lose the train. I woke up very unrested because we had a very intense few days. And I want to be honest that, my physical energy today is a bit a challenge. And also I feel very challenged because at one point I tried to serve a coffee to Misha, and Misha, he was concentrating in his meditation. Eventually I knocked his shoulder, said, sorry, this machine is going, and basically it was too much coffee, and so I was a German teaching Italian how to make an espresso, and that was a little bit of humiliation, I have to say. And we live a stressful life. I think if I would ask, raising your hand, if you feel like totally relaxed in your life, I don't know if you would. Someone just said, one at the chorus said, I'm very relaxed. Amen. Fantastic. And I'm sure that Misha proposed this teaching on the Sabbath, or rest, or believe that you've done some path. And that we've been teaching this kind of material in Milano. And when we think about rest, the first thing you think of, let me see if I manage correct, get this nice, okay. This is actually your lead evangelist, relaxing. And when he sent me this picture, I suggested to buy some special protection for his feet, high quality, so I sent some cream immediately to make sure it wasn't getting burned. But the association of rest for us is a physical rest, where we going on holiday, being a place where there is no connection of phone, and truly that is a form of rest. But sometimes I remember days where in my life I was on holiday and I was totally unrested because I was thinking about the problem at work, the issue I had. I don't know if you ever happened to you, and I wasn't at all at peace, And we've been talking about this spiritual rest and looking at some stuff on the internet. I know Misha is very good in this. He's kind of professional teaching and coaching. There are a lot of kind of rest, which honestly I was thinking about one or two, but this one was very interesting, and we all know physical rest and how it applies, no big lesson on that. Mental rest, surely nowadays turning off the phone, avoiding social media, I'm sure you talk about a lot about that. Emotional rest. We can be overwhelmed by people and situations, so spending time alone is still, connected to the spiritual one. Having even a special friends to talk to, which is a very spiritual practice to have. I do that actually 5 times a week. I have a friends in London, spiritual friends, where we connect daily to see how we do it, and that is very special, very important. And then, turning off TV, that would be creating rest, breaking from work, finding a hobby, whatever, it's very interesting. Psychology does usually make sense in many areas, it's connected to spirituality, but today we talk about spiritual rest. And God, of course, sorry, I remember I need to switch both. From the very beginning, I'm not going to do a lesson on things that you know very well, but somehow, God wanted to start His word with saying, I'm going to rest. I'm going to rest. I'm not going to read the scripture you know very well. On the 7th day, He rested. And then, through the law, but that doesn't mean that before the law this didn't happen, eventually made it clear that you need to obey this law in Exodus, where He says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. I stop from work, you do the same. Don't do anything. Remember is holy and holy day. Very, we use it when we think holiday in English, we think a vacation, but it's actually a holiday, And when we're given a law, the law can become something that you do for the sake of the law itself, or I need to stop. But the real heart of the Sabbath is expressed in Isaiah. And Isaiah says, if you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath, and from doing as you please on my holiday, you can call the Sabbath a delight. What a word, a delight. And the Lord's holiday honorable. And if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord. So there is this combination of delight and joy. To find the joy means you're really excited about this holiday, which is not going necessarily to the beach or to the mountains, even though that is not wrong at all, but it's a day holy, dedicated to the Lord, where you find delight and joy, which is a beautiful feeling to experience. Doesn't mean that it comes natural, not in my case. And the problem is, it's there. It's looking in the mirror and I see that is the problem. It's me. I prevent myself to have this delight and this joy. And today I want to talk about 2 things that are related to this rest. I just checking my time because I'm Italian and usually I'm short, but I want to make sure. And we're going to look at 2 major scriptures. There is one scripture in Hebrew. My advice for a lot of you who are seasoned in the faith to read chapter 3 and chapter 4 and to look into it, because there is a lot of connection to other Old Testament material. It's very profound, and it will take just a day dedicated to this chapter, which I'm not going to do. But let's read it. Now we have believed. Now who we have believed in entered the rest, just as God said. So I declare on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. And yet his work has been finished since the creation of the world. For somewhere he has spoken about the seventh day in these words, on the seventh day God rested from all his works. And again in the passage above he says, they shall never enter my rest. Therefore, since it still remained for some to enter the rest, and since those who formerly had the good news proclaimed to them did not go into in because of their disobedience, God again set a certain day, calling it today. This he did when, a long time later, he spoke through David, as in the passage already quoted today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua has given them rest, God would have not spoken later about another day. There remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rest for their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest, so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. Now, sorry for my English, my reading. It's an intense passage, and I suggest you to read even part of chapter 3 and reread it, because it's very, very complex. You know, it says, no, it's not the promised land, it's not the promised land, it's not the law of the Sabbath. We're talking about something more profound, the Sabbath day. And he's teaching that unless you rest like God rested, you will not enter. And the key words are disobedient, harden of your heart. And it's interesting, it's a strange contradiction. To enter God's rest, you have to make every effort. Making every effort usually doesn't sound like a resting word, so you have to make every effort. It's like, I need to make every effort to go to bed. Maybe sometime we do, But I want to tell a story to explain practically this passage. And I try to be short, making sure of, because I need to go back in nearly 9 years. 9 years I went through a time where I was feeling bitter for some circumstances in the church, and I started to go for a walk from work. It was 60 kilometer walking, so I was leaving 6:30 in the morning. And this went on for nearly a year and a half. So the first 3 months, it was taking about over an hour and 10 minutes. And for the first 30 minutes, sometimes I was so bitter that I couldn't really, I was mumbling. I was distracted. I don't know if you ever relate that you don't know how to pray. Okay. And then the last few minutes I started to really enjoy, And this was for 3 months. Eventually, after 3 months, just to give you the time, I couldn't wait to wake up and to have an hour and plus time with God. And that time, many incredible things happened. Many incredible things. No, I wasn't focusing on mission, on anything, but I met so many people. It was incredible transformation. And at that time, I was connecting with his brother in London, and I'm not going to tell all the story, but there was some inspiration. I said, I'm fed up in Milano. I'm not from Milano, I'm from the Venetian region, and I want to start there. And I had a lot of friends that loved spiritual conversation, And so I started to have this kind of connection. I was using Zoom that you learned during COVID, but I knew it much before that. And I was starting to have this online conversation with people, and a lot of things happened. And I started to have people reading the Bible. No, I don't like sometimes using the word studying the Bible. It sounds a bit, sometimes even weird. You're sharing the good news, you're sharing your life, you're sharing, the enjoyment and the challenges of life. Because, we always say, we have challenges as a Christian. So I was sharing that, and there was a friendship that really started, and some of these guys were our schoolmates. Then people I met through other people, some guy who left the church many years ago. So it was a connection started, and I think God gave me a real vision, and through that time, some of you met my son Massimo. Massimo got diagnosed cancer during COVID, which was, during COVID, created an exponential effect because we had to visit him in hospital. I couldn't visit him. I went to look from distance because of COVID. And Massimo went through times where it was life threat, in his health situation. And even in that time, I felt like God was giving me vision of using that situation to glorify. And through that time, I saw a schoolmate from the 80s who became a disciple, people restored, and there was such an explosion. And this church in Venice, we once met on the North Beach, just above Venice. We were like 50 people, was very encouraging. But then things didn't go as I was substituting God's Spirit with my work. We'd say, rolling up sleeve, planning, thinking, with best intention of really serving God. But I was making every effort with my own effort to make this church move. And I'd go, attitude, burnout, I saw things not going well. And my heart became disobedience, and my heart go hard. And at one point I got attitude towards God. I didn't explicitly recognize that, but I did. And I finally understood that I was battling against God. I wasn't serving God. I wasn't entering His rest. I was trying to do things with my own strength. Now, if you read Paul's life, it's not a relaxed resting, but he was led by the Spirit. And I'm sure he learned some big lesson. And I really understood how you cannot please God if you try to do things with your own strength. If you try to... It's clearly saying you have to enjoy God. And that lesson I learned basically 5 years before, that walk, that was exactly what was the right way of approaching God, which wasn't focused on the mission, was enjoyment, like the delight in Isaiah was mentioned. Delight, we call a delight there, a day of enjoyment. You really enjoy to spend time with God, and I start with bitterness. So I have to look at the path, we have path in life, I'm sure some scientists here knows how pattern works. And I have to say, oh look, I was here, and now I need to start again. And to go up is tough. So I know that this is a table now, I don't think it's the time for timing. Well, I ask you to wonder if in your Christian life you always walk with God, led by the Spirit of God, and appreciating the rest of God, and making every effort. For me, it does make sense, because that turning the curve from going down to going up, it does. It's like playing from whatever, something difficult. You go in a direction, you turn, repentance means going, it's a decision, but it's a painful decision. And when you start to do it, practically, you have resistance because you were used in one direction, go the other direction, it doesn't come easy. And so this scripture became live when I said, wow, this has been me, resisting, hard and disobedient. And I wasn't I wasn't enjoying God, I was against Him. So pretending to be a godly man, but doing exactly the opposite God has been teaching me. So I leave you this as a first point, as a reflection, if in your life you feel like, the question is, are you rested with God? Are you in His rest? Have you made every effort? Or somehow there is an edge of disobedience and lack of trust and whatever, it's in this passage. And I encourage you to read it again, because it's very profound. There's a lot of connection with other story, Joshua, whatever. It's very interesting if you want to go into the scriptures. So I move on, checking the time. I move on to another two passages, and I put them together. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit more I will talk about my heart and some good things where we have to be careful not to boast. But I can genuinely say I think I did well in this area, and some area where I did not well at all. And why I'm picking up these two scriptures and put them together, because we're talking about rest. And Psalm 23, let's read it. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside white water. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear not evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And I read the other one. I overlap a little bit the slide. Come to me, all of you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and I will find rest. I need to read here the rest. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me, and you learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Now, John 10 talks about that Jesus is the good shepherd. So somehow, I'm not saying that Matthew 11 is a fulfillment of Psalm 23. We know that Jesus is the good shepherd. But these two passages, I put them together because there are a lot of similarity, and they complete an interesting perspective of rest. They both provide rest and refreshment, makes me lie in green pasture, or if you're wearing burden, I give you rest. It's a different perspective. I don't know if you ever feel wearing burden. I do feel often wearing burden. So both provide that kind of rest and refreshment. They both provide divine guidance. My shepherds. And in the other one, I'm teaching you, follow me. My way is a good way, it's light, learn from me. Peace and security, they provide a place where I fear no evil, even in darkest moments. And you find rest of your soul. And it makes God very accessible, which is a big thing with rest. My shepherd, and Jesus become next to you, yoke, you share the same level, your brother, is next to you, and that is a concept that these are beautiful words, and we say, like reading Shakespeare, beautiful words, but it's one thing to read and be delighted reading, is one thing actually experiencing those words. It's two different things, And what I want to share is the experience of these two passages in my life. As I said, some where these words became real in a positive way, and some, which I will conclude, that made me think a lot about myself. And as I was sharing before about Max, Max was diagnosed in May 2020 with cancer, was third stage going towards fourth, and lymphoma is very curable, but for Max it's been a drama. I don't know how many blood transfusions Max had, but countless. And the blood cells weren't working, was COVID. And so it was, as a parent, a lot of you are parents, the pain was huge, to say at least. And it was really, you say, sometime that was the level you were producing. It was very intense. And that's, you either go down, or you have to go up. You can't stay, you don't stay still, You either go down or you go up. And I think when he says, I will fear no evil, and through the darkest valley, there were darkest valley in our life, Mickey and I, but we were surrounded by a lot of love, people in an amazing way, amazing. But also, I think, you go through an experience of spiritual seeing the shepherd who's really taking you, hugging you, and that was a transformational spiritual growth. You know, you can never ask a question, would you like to, if you go back to, those are questions, doesn't make sense. But somehow, you take that experience in your life and you say, wow, that was an incredible experience of growth, you know. And this is, of course, the most intense. You know, we had a lot of challenges with health, but let's say this was intense, very intense. Now, what I'm going to say now is not exactly comparable to a son in hospital. You know, I remember Mickey and I, Christmas 2020, Max had, I remember, 40 plus fever, white, you know. They sent him home from hospital because it was Christmas Day, but they were calling us from hospital every 30 minutes to check how he was doing, and we were sending him back in the morning of 26 because he was really in such a bad shape, you know, and at least they were totally controlled with machinery, you know. That was very, very, very intense. But in Matthew 11, it probably reflects more my daily life, and you know, you cannot compare your son to work. But I'm sure that some of you relate to stress at work. Now, I'm away, so I would be very careful to speak. But let's say I have some hierarchy on the top that is very good in finding faults. So if you do 100 things, and one of them wasn't perfect, pick on that, and you get a letter, a mail, and the rest, even though maybe on the other hand, sometimes you receive compliments from your customer, they've done an amazing job in following their cases. I work in IT, in big projects like with Philips in Holland, you know, big international connection with the industrial electrotechnical companies. And that caused me a lot of emotional stress because sometimes, there are not always like that, but there are weeks where you feel like I have to go to work. It's like going to school, we are not prepared for an exam, you know, you're going to be judged and stuff. And through this time of life, my parents' health is not doing well at all, so I'm traveling back home in Trieste, you know, which is 400 plus kilometers from Milano. And so I'm exhausted, you know, because I have no holidays, just going back and forth, driving, stress at work. And lately I had a lot of very difficult situation, even with colleagues, because I manage people, and I have to liaison with, you know, my boss and situation. Very, you know, when you deal with people, and they're very difficult. And this Matthew 11 became, after probably a month, I was very stressed. I said, wow, this is the solution. I said, God, please, I want to take your yoke. Because with mine I can't handle anymore. I'm burned out. I mean, and I had to be very specific, because in those days there were maybe a specific situation, you know, very precise, and I was praying for a specific solution for that situation. I'm not going to explain, but and through that I was very confident I was going to intervene. So something happened. And then, 12 o'clock, it seems like it's happening. No, and then that didn't happen. And eventually, at the end of the day, things turn around as my prayer. Now, God is not always to provide solutions. Sometimes work can go wrong. You know, it's not that He's here to solve our problems. But yet, you know, there was an approach which was related to the peace and the rest in my heart. To be able to be in a stressful situation, but to be at rest, because my understanding was not to have a rest, to have a life without stress, because we cannot. We know the race of life. We race, by the way, and this is a stressful modern life, but it's to find a spiritual rest in a stressful time. You know, it's not just going on holiday, but managing that rest. Because tomorrow I know we'll have challenges when I go back. But to be prepared day by day, you know, and in this run. And that has been incredible, because this very basic teaching, which should be taught from the very beginning, sometime after 34 years, you can miss the point. You know, you have to always go back to the basic, like in sport, when you play basketball sometimes. But you see that you don't even, whatever, I forgot the words, but the basic how you should, kick the ball, whatever. Throw the ball, sorry, the short I don't play for a long time. And, you have to go to the basic. And the basic, sometimes are the essential way of telling your, life. And rest in the first part was to connect in a good intention to serve God, became a total going against disobedience and wasn't finding the joy and the delight. And in the second, I lost the relationship because as I need personal relation, I need to connect to people. I need to have special friends where I can be open. But I need to have that friendship like Moses and Abraham. God said, I speak to Moses like a friend, and you cannot do that when you are not at rest with him, when you are not delighted, when you are not in joy. And that process of walking really showed me that I was not connected. And that is the turning point where in the last few months, I slowly start again to do the same, to really regain the sort of connection. And now, in the light of these scriptures, I want to say a couple of things that they have the same common denominator. It's called anger. I don't know if you know the word. Basically, this is a very recent story. Goes back to last weekend. So I had two circumstances. I start from the lighter one. So I went to Trieste to visit my parents, and a friend asked me a lift on the way, halfway through. So I had to do a little deviation, drop, and so it was like half an hour. And I was in a rush. I was actually working, taking hours permit, but then working at night, and so it was a favor, but I was happy to do a favor. And so I dropped, and then I carried on. And in the way back, we agreed, so okay, when I'm 20 minutes away, I call you. And when I'm there, please find yourself downstairs with the luggage and I pick you up. So 20 minutes I called, and I made a print screen, 27 calls, missed called. And inside me, I had there was a movie in the 70s, The Justice of the Night. I don't know, it was Bronson. He had a movie that was, making justice at night against someone who killed his wife. So I felt like that, what's going on? I was and when I arrived, the person wasn't. I'm not even describing the male feel, so I don't want to give any hints. Best friends by the way. And I rang the bell because it was hosted by another person, and don't know what the person is. And so I sent the message, which I deleted. I'm leaving, goodbye. And that was my message. Then I definitely maybe I deleted one. But and eventually, after 20 minutes, so late, she, sorry, and I was very, very hard line on the phone, and I put the phone down. And I felt, no excuse. I mean, so when we met in the car, some slight excuse. Eventually, then, after 10 minutes, I said, let go, with friends, and and I made some jokes on whatever, and this was something, but when I felt totally right to be angry, don't know if you could relate to a story like that. And but then what happened was much worse. On the Friday night, I rushed. So on the way up, went to the hospital, stayed with my mom. Very bad situation. So they live in Trieste, which is a town with no parking. I mean, if you find a spot, unless you want to spend €25 a night. So I saw a car park, I passed by and I stopped, put the reverse, and a guy just arrived. I put even the blinking whatever to say I'm coming back. It was 5 meters, not even, so it was obvious and I heard, said, what's he doing? And the guy got in, and I was, you kidding? So I got out, and the guy said, I came first. I said, no, you saw me, I was there, and the guy was obvious, from the the man was a very normal sized guy, and I said, you get out now, you get out. And the guy made joke of me, made fun of me, offended me with some, I said, this is courageous because just, there was, I don't know if you know Bud Spencer, the guy, I was really tempted to do some Bud Spencer, but it can think of laughing, but anyway, and I didn't let go, and I said, I don't know, where did you come from? So I really said, where did you come from? Are you kidding? How rude you are, and he was offending me, and eventually, I was very physical in a sense. I was outside, I didn't do anything, he left. So I went upstairs, I parked the car and said, no, this guy's going to do something in my car. So after an hour I shed and he scratched my car on the side. And I felt like I'm going to find him. And so that was Friday, so I battled it. Well, no, I thought I had so many other things to do, but there were 2 times I wanted revenge. I really wanted revenge. I wanted either to find the car or finding him. And I was saying, I didn't see him outside. I say, do some, I say, what you do now? Give me money for the car or something. There was, and that made me think of, this situation made me think a lot. And then I thought about, I got angry, with this person, and I felt justified because I felt like there was lack of respect, there was injustice, there was humiliation because the guy actually humiliated me, and suffering in the sense, the situation, and that was something I said, wow, these are very close to each other, Friday, Sunday, and the effect on me was devastating because I was angry, people, I'm sure there was sin because there was, bad behavior somehow from both sides, different proportion, but, but the effect on sin on my life was devastating, the anger, the frustration, the hate, wanted to do something, and even with my friends, I felt like I'm leaving, so that's it, you go home, whatever, it takes 6 hours without a car, who cares, it's your problem. There was no something, I said, where is Christ in this picture? There was no Christ. And so through this weekend, because it started with the first one was a big one, and I battled through and I started to think about it, this is not in Christ. And I actually called a couple of people to share the story, and people said, well, you should have just left in the first place. You just, And for some of you works maybe in IT, I'm sure nowadays. So anyway, there is something we do when we have a cyber security accident. Is something you do the root cause, what is the root cause of the problem. Then you do lesson learn, what the lesson you learn. This is a certification, or you do, and then you action to avoid this happening again. This is very pragmatic. A German would literally focus like that, root cause, not in Italy, but root cause, lesson learned to avoid. But spiritually, somehow, I was thinking, I shared a couple of stories, checking the time, a couple of stories of where I think those scriptures were alive in a good sense in my life, with my son, with work, where I handle the situation with God, and somehow I put in practice, but these scriptures are wide. And even Psalm 23 go through a process of, through the dark valley, then God will celebrate and will give you time of refreshing, because we'll somehow prize you because you learn a spiritual growth. And as after 34 years, I have to deal with my anger, which I'm still learning. No, sorry, I know this is church service. I tend to, some time ago I get rebuked. I do too many jokes. So. There is a wider growth, spiritual growth that is never stopping. And sometimes we learn one thing where we are weak at, but then we lose. David told preached this amazing Psalm 23, but then he also wrote Psalm 51. So it means that amazing lesson of shepherd at some point in his life was kind of gone. There was days where he lost it, and it wasn't a reaction of anger, it was just a premeditation of really doing something terrible, if you know the story, adultery and homicide or whatever, So, we know that we need to keep training and expand and never stop learning. So rest as an experience is something that is never stopping. And so the conclusion to go to this root cause, lesson learned, and surely is a deeper, anger is a big thing. Anger is not something that you learn and that's it, doesn't happen again. It's necessarily a connection, an awareness of you about to boil. Even in psychology they give a lot of breathing, blah, 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 which is probably great. But somehow if that area would have been, knowing my weakness in the area, would have been more developed, probably I would have done something different. I would avoid the situation. And so that, when I thought about that was before even this second accident, I put these scriptures. There was a conclusion. This is done with AI, since I took it from an Italian church. But I actually said, that was my conclusion on rest. Rest is protected, possessing everything, experiencing profound fulfillment and complete restoration, and have someone who guides you. And I said, let me see what image I produced. And I was curious. So are you Italian? Yes. So I gave me this image which was more related to the Italian culture. And but that was interesting. But the final scripture that Sunday, so Sunday morning, I was thinking, I missed something in my spiritual growth. There is something which in my rest process is really missing. And this passage, I'm sure most of you know as well, it says, when they hurled their insult at him, he did not retaliate. When they suffered, he made no threat. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judged justly. He himself bore our sin in his body on the cross, so that we might die to sin and live for righteousness. By his wounds, we've been healed. And I read that probably 10 times, and I was thinking the insult. I was thinking, why? When he insulted me, if I would just add this in my heart, that rest, which is joyful delight presence with God, I would not retaliate. I would say, you say, I'm just like Christ taking my cross. I would say, you are a rude person, terrible what you've done. Take your, and leave. I think it's fair to say something. It's not that we have to be beaten. But, indignation, anger where I arrived, Because I'm sure if the guy would have been my size, I probably would have been different, attitude. True, I noticed, I'm not a violent guy at all, but, surely I wanted justice done. Here, the justice is done by God. Yes. And that was my first struggle. He suffered because somehow he insulted me. There's some dialect word he used which were very offensive. And I was like, what is this guy doing? He's crazy. And he made no threat. I did threat. I was physically posing my presence to him. I kept the door open and said, you get out. And I said, this is, I said, can you invite him to church? I'm going to come to church afterwards. I don't think that would be, And you are human, we make mistakes. And the truth is, I thought if I would meet, I should actually apologize. There was a scary thought, but a real thought. Because whatever he did, I should have apologized. It happened to me once. I was in a swimming pool, and I was open air. So there are a lot of people sit on the border to sunbathe, and I was doing my underlaps. And when I'm not good. So the people usually, you don't sit in the board, and he was watching his phone. And the guy said, "Oh, you wet my phone." I said, "Oh, why you sit here?" And then when I got out, I said, "Sorry for." I said, oh, he apologized too. It was like surprise, you know. I was like, "Wow, that was a great thing to do." This happened last year, I remember. And but the truth is, this passage became surreal because to feel treated, to be insulted is an awful thing. Although to be respected and to retaliate, revenge is a very human nature. And that spiritual growth, that is the sign of sanctification, which is very difficult. I preach it and I feel very challenged by it because I realized the lesson learned was huge and I feel very challenged. But I say, wow, if I would have it in my heart, that would have been very different. Not so much for the scratch, it's a company car, just new, we put some tape so my boss doesn't see. But it's just the emotional, spiritual experience. Just wrong, bad example as a Christian. But not even worry what people think, but a determination to really gain sanctification. And now that we take the wine and the bread, not as a ritual, but as a moment of connection. It's a beautiful connection table setting to meditate on things, on your life, on your rest, whether it's the joy in the life. I think it's a big thing because it seems easy, but sometimes we come in the morning, we have to pray, we have to read. We do it with a good heart, but we have no joy in the light necessarily. Or maybe we try to do things for the church, but we don't do in the approach of Hebrews 4. We have to rest and make every effort to rest, to actually do His work with the right heart. And whatever area in your life of feeling burden or feeling God is my shepherd, and maybe you have to look at the things you feel good about yourself in a positive way, of self-awareness, but also everywhere maybe you get stuck for years, because after 34 years there are things I get stuck, I justified, and maybe it's time to go and change. So now that we take the wine and bread, take the time, not just today, to think about these things. And I pray, I hope this sharing has been somehow giving you some inspiration, something for your life to go and change. Amen. Can I pray for? Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for being together. Thank you for this beautiful fellowship, Father. And it's great to see friends, Father. One thing I love about this church, Father, is the atmosphere and the fellowship, Father. And I don't like to boast about my church, but it's your church, by the way, Father. But I love the fellowship. I like be welcome a brother, like a friend, to immediately connect, even though we can be very different from background, to be together, Father. And because it's provided by you, Father. And through these scriptures, Father, you teach us to take your yoke, the yoke your Son taught us to take, to feel the friendship and the same peer approach, to become very approachable, God, for us, Father, but also show the most incredible sign of reality, Father, for this suffering, which to the human logic does not make sense at all. How can God do this cross? Does not make sense. And we, after many years, still struggle to really grasp with the depth of our heart the power of the cross, because it's scary, the change we are called to do, Father, in our life, Father. But I pray that all of us can take one thing and really make this process of sanctification bigger, Father. I thank you in the name of your Son, Jesus.